Welcome to Diverse Joy, a podcast and educational video series that infuses science, practical skills, and most of all, joy into diversity discussions. My co-host is the pretty in pink, Dr. Amber Nelson.
And my co-host is the bold and stylized Dr. William T.L. Cox. Yay! So, Will, what's bringing you joy in this season?
Well, so this is July of 2026. Last year in July of 2025, some friends from the Twin Cities and Eric Roman and I went on a trip to the San Francisco area, specifically to go to the Skywalker Vineyard.
That's so cool.
It's really hard to get tickets to be able to do that. We had a tour of all their kind of winery stuff. We had to sign NDAs, presumably to protect their winemaking stuff.
Proprietary.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was really cool. We got to try a lot of wines and see an art gallery of Star Wars art that's not actually normally open to the public, which was really cool. And while we were there, we also went to the headquarters of Industrial Lights and Magic, one of the special effects companies that started with Star Wars.
Wow, okay.
And a few fun things around San Francisco. We went to this tiki bar that's really cool. It's called Tonga. And it's indoors, but indoors they have a lagoon.
Ooh.
And then a floating barge on the lagoon where a band plays.
Okay.
And so that was fun. And we had good times with good friends. And Roman can probably share pictures on the video.
That's awesome.
And it was a lot of fun.
So cool. So I'm going to ask maybe an ignorant question. So it says Skywalker Vineyards. Is that what it's called?
Skywalker Ranch.
It is on Skywalker Ranch. Is that the same thing? The vineyards and ranch is the same.
Skywalker Vineyard is on Skywalker Ranch.
Okay. So that's where my brain was going. So I'm not like that far off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's George Lucas's private vineyard ranch.
Wow.
Land.
Very cool.
A lot of the creators in Star Wars come and do retreats there when they're kind of working together on coming up with ideas for their movies and shows.
When he says that we went to Industrial Light and Magic, he means we went outside the building because it was the weekend and they were closed, and we creeped into the window.
Just kind of looked in.
But they had cool life-size statues of various Star Wars droids and creatures. And
that's awesome. Well, I bet that was an incredible experience for you all, especially as such big Star Wars buffs. So
it was
very
a blast.
Cool.
It was
That's
a blast.
awesome. That's awesome.
So what about you, Amber? What's bringing you joy?
Well, over the last year in particular, I think for longer than that, but really very intentionally over the last year or so, I have been really leaning into dopamine dressing, meaning wearing clothes that are just fun, that bring me joy, that are colorful and mixing patterns. And I've found a few clothing stores, online stores that really lean into that aesthetic, just smiley faces and just mixing all kinds of different things. New Works is one of my favorites. And just really just having fun with what I'm wearing, my jewelry and my clothes, and mixing things. And it has always brought me joy to play with my clothing and my glasses and things like that, but have just really leaned very hard into that in the last year and been much more bold and just more playful with my clothing. And it just brings me a lot of joy. And it's really fun to see my patients, my kids really respond to it. And it breaks this barrier with kiddos that meet me for the first time, and being able to see me be just bold and use it as a means of creating connection and conversation and rapport building with my patients. And I've had kids tell me oh, you remind me of Elsbeth, which is this character on TV that's really quirky and fun and kind of always very vibrant. And that those are the things oh, I saw you in the waiting room and I wanted to ask for you specifically to be my behavioral health, clinician. And so anyway, it brings me a lot of joy. And I think it brings other people joy too, when they just can see somebody especially as a professional, just be playful and fun and be boldly themselves and just unabashed in kind of what you're wearing. And so, yep, dopamine dressing has been my joy, and have really leaned pretty far into it in the last year or so. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, dopamine
Yay.
dressing.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So, Will, what are we talking about today?
So, we always talk about kind of our model for creating change that you like to talk about as the MATES, motivation,
Yes.
awareness, tools, and effort. Making meaningful change and sustaining it requires we all maintain that motivation to keep working on bias, keep learning new things, and all of that. But there are some things that folks do or kind of traps they can kind of fall into or trap themselves in that can result in kind of demotivating them. There are a lot of things that people think are going to be really beneficial for diversity or for anti-racism or whatever. But then the end result, the research shows, tends to be less motivation rather than more.
Right.
And so we're going to talk about some of those kind of demotivational traps with an eye on understanding them so we can make sure that we don't fall into them.
Absolutely.
One of the places where I tend to talk about this the most, these traps can really happen with regard to many different domains, but especially with kind of educational media. So a lot of times people, on our show, we emphasize entertainment media a lot as a powerful way to kind of build that diverse joy that helps work against bias. And we don't focus as much on educational media, not because it's wrong or anything. We of course support that, but kind of everyone else already talks about that. I'm sure there are a million other diversity podcasts, diversity reading lists and things that are going to focus on all the different biopics you should be reading or watching or whatever that kind of have more of an educational focus. And so that's just, we don't want to duplicate the work that's already out there a lot.
Right.
Also, educational media very often literally speaks for itself.
Right.
The headlines or what they say in the trailer of a biopic, it's like, oh, this important historical figure who you need to know about. It's literally telling you why you should be watching it. Those types of media really advocate for themselves. Whereas the more kind of entertainment stuff, which on the back end might kind of have the net effect of also working against bias, we try to speak for that side of it. But we never are trying to discourage people from that kind of educational media. It's a both and. It's a yes and, like you like to say. We want both. We're emphasizing entertainment a lot because we think it's underemphasized.
Right.
But when people engage with that kind of educational media, and I should also say entertainment and educational media are not necessarily discrete concepts. They can definitely be both. Good entertainment media teaches us important lessons about life. Good educational media should be kind of entertaining and engaging. But when I make those categories, I'm mostly talking about how people kind of approach it. Are they approaching it with solemnity and like, oh, I'm going to be learning something, or with joy?
Right.
So again, we never try to shy people away from educational media, but there are these kind of demotivational traps that some types of educational media or some ways of consuming it that people can fall into. And so I'm going to talk through these 4 demotivational traps. We are, just so that people can understand how they can be demotivational and to make sure that when you engage with educational content that you don't let it demotivate you.
Right.
The first of these demotivational traps is sometimes folks in their media diet, their diversity education media diet, they focus too exclusively on stuff that is sad, depressing, the atrocities of the past, the atrocities of the present. My kind of go-to example of this, there were a lot of folks during the pandemic with kind of response to George Floyd started paying more attention maybe to anti-racism work, and a lot of book clubs started. And I know in particular of one, it was a white women's book club for anti-racism, and they would read books. Each and every one of the books, I'm sure, is great and important and covers important topics, but they were all about just how awful things are for people of color, especially Black folks. And the person who was telling me about this, she was like, every time I just started dreading this book club because it made me so sad, not because I didn't believe it was important. And women started dropping out of the group, even saying it's because it just makes me sad all the time.
Yeah. It's too depressing.
And so focusing too exclusively on kind of the negative negative without having that joy, without having, well, how are we making progress?
Right.
And something where you can kind of see that progress or feel that progress when you're making changes in your life.
Right.
It's demotivational. And that kind of harkens back to what we talked about with ADHD a little bit. You need that dopamine.
Yeah, you got to have something that's going to motivate you, right? You have to pair the thing that you are less motivated by, or that's less that you're trying to avoid internally, right? And there's room and there's importance in doing the educational work, right? Like, I applaud them for doing that work and saying, hey, we need to learn, we need to do better. And you have to pair it with the hope part, because if you're only going down the negative path, you get stuck in the mire, and then it feels like there's no way out. It feels like this is a massive system with historical entrenched roots. What am I gonna do about this? Right?
You get powerless.
You feel completely powerless, and you have nothing to move towards. You have to have some sort of carrot. You have to have and I think I've brought this term before, but Sankofa, right? So there's this idea of Sankofa, and it is this idea that you are firmly rooted with your feet moving forward, and also looking to the past. So you have to look at the past. You have to look at where we've been, what's been going on, what the hard things are. But we also have to be firmly rooted in moving forward as well. And you have to have something that you're going to be motivated to be moving towards. And if it all feels just hopeless, then you get into a paralysis. You get into a paralysis state.
Yeah, and it also relates to something we've discussed throughout the season, which is, avoidance. Like, we want to avoid avoidance. Yeah. So also focusing on the negative things, even if it's just present day stuff, like not necessarily the past. If it's all, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, all of the things you should avoid doing. Right. That also has that kind of paralyzing effect, or people just don't know what they should be doing. Right. They just don't know what not to do.
Yeah. I talk about that a lot with parenting with my kids, right? Is that often as parents will go to that place of telling kids don't do something, but that's been their go-to, right? Or that is the way in which they're coping, or that is the way in which they're handling this. And then all of a sudden you take that thing away and they don't have something to replace it with. Right. And sometimes it gets worse because we've not replaced it with anything to move them towards. We've just say, don't do X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do when I encounter this thing, right?
So having too narrow a focus on only sad, atrocity type things, that's one of the big demotivational traps. The next one is something that we study in the research literature, the behavioral literature, called anchoring, which kind of relates to part of what you said. So sometimes people will look at the kind of atrocities, again, to keep reusing that word, and then they use that as a basis for comparison for their own behavior.
Right.
So they look at slave owners in the past, people who are enslaving folks, and then they kind of define racism by that. Yeah. And they say, well, compared to a slave owner, I'm great. Right. and
I'm
you
not
know what,
that
you
bad.
are.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you have your anchor on an extreme form of racism or bias or whatever we're talking about, you're always going to look better than that. And it's too easy. That doesn't mean you don't have progress to make or something to work on. 100%. And so we talk about a lot of the research on this talks about it almost exactly like I just did, anchoring on the past versus the future, where we've overcome bias and everyone's treated equally and has equal opportunities. People who anchor on the future tend to be more motivated and work more towards that future. The other way it can happen is just within the present. So if you look at statistics on hate crimes or people like ICE kidnapping immigrants and shoving them into vans, and if that ends up defining what racism is, and I mean, it is a part of what racism is.
Yes.
But if you compare yourself to that, of course you're going to look great. And so then people are like, well, I'm so great. I'm so much better than that.
This form.
But they're demotivated.
Yeah.
So don't use others' negative behavior, especially extreme negative negative behavior as a basis for judging yourself positively. You probably, everyone listening to this probably is very good compared to those awful extremes. For sure. But don't let that demotivate you. You want to keep working and keep learning and keep cultivating diverse joy.
Absolutely. Well, it reminds me of last year in particular, and it continues to be a conversation. There's this group on YouTube, and they have clips and stuff across all social media platforms called Jubilee. Oh. And they do this, they do several different things with the intent of trying to create commonality and have discussions around perhaps more controversial topics. They started this series called Surrounded, and they have one person in the middle that has a particular view, and then they have like 20 people on the opposite end of the spectrum to debate with. And they've come under fire recently because rather than it being like, oh, here are two kind of equally valid, intellectually valid kind of perspectives here, we have usually one person who's fairly well researched, is grounded, and then people that are very extreme versions of the opposite end. And so then people, I think the conversation and criticism has been like, we're now normalizing this is what the opposite of this perspective is. And so people are going like, well, I don't have to change. Like, I'm not that bad. I'm not advocating for those things. Right. And so it's not actually moving folks to what their hope is, again, is around to be able to have conversations, because people on both ends kind of feel more validated in their perspectives, or more validated. They feel like
they're more moderate.
They feel like they're more moderate than they actually are. And so they're not actually moving towards trying to have better conversations, because they're seeing these extreme ends and saying, well, I'm not there. I'm not saying we need to have all white communities, right? Yeah. Which has been something that has come up in some of those conversations, right?
And one that you told me about before we were on mic that really stuck with me. There was someone who self-identified as a fascist.
Yes.
So someone's like, I am a fascist. Yes, I believe in fascism. And so I think of the more moderate person who might hear that and be like, oh, I'm pretty good. But that more moderate person might still be supporting policies
100%
that end up promoting a form of fascism. And with them comparing themselves to that extreme, they won't even examine that as much.
And there was even somebody on that same episode that self-identified as far right and far right conservative, and then he's like, Mom, I thought I was extreme, or I thought I was really far right, but I'm much more moderate than I thought that I was, because there were these people that literally self-identified as fascists and saying these things. He's like, I just never thought that I'd hear somebody say and so it's anchoring. Again, it's anchoring, and so then it moves it, rather than what the intent is to have people have conversation and try to move closer to the middle. It's actually it's what it's doing is it's causing people to
move farther
apart and kind of stick a little bit more firmly in their beliefs, rather than actually moving closer together.
Yeah. That also reminds me a bit of confirmation bias.
100%.
You're getting lots of confirmatory examples that, hey, you're pretty moderate or what have you. And then we already know you're inclined to weigh those types of examples extra heavily. Yeah.
Well, and there are books, and there's lots of research around, even in politics, right? I'm not even getting into like specifics of politics, but that the research would show that there's more people in the purple range than there are on the far ends, though right now I think we have a lot of separation. There's a book called Beyond Your Bubble by Tanya, I can't remember her last name, so I'll let Eric Croman look that up. But and she talks a lot about that, like how we can have better middling conversations, because the research would support that more of us fall in this purple area than others. Yeah, Beyond Your Bubble, how to connect across, I think, political lines. Yeah. What is it?
It's Beyond Your Bubble, how to connect across the political divide, skills and strategies for conversations that work, by Tanya Israel.
That's right. Yeah. Cool. But yeah, anyway, she talks a lot about that, right? That like, hey, there is so much here, but what that does is it really pushes us to this idea that, and that confirmation bias, that's where I was going with it, was that we already think like, oh, people that don't agree with me are on this other end of the spectrum. And then you put them in a situation like that and it says, see everybody that doesn't believe, they're all over here. And we lose the opportunity. We lose the opportunity to move forward. We lose the opportunity. And it's demotivating, right?
Right.
It's demotivating.
Yeah. So anchoring. Yeah. That comparison to those extremes ends up, demotivating folks. Don't do that. And I think being aware of hate groups, hate crimes, the atrocities of the past and the present is an important part of being an informed citizen. So we, again, this is a both and. We should still be doing that. Just make sure you're not doing it in a way that demotivates you. Our goal is always to maintain that motivation. We all have to keep building a better world piece by piece.
Right.
All right. Next, demotivational trap also kind of leans into some of these things that might have more negative emotions associated with them. But some people see feeling bad as an end in itself. So the most extreme example of this, and now I'm bringing in an extreme. So, but the most extreme example of this, I remember people sending me this article years ago. There were these white folks who were paying these black people to kind of yell at them and tell them how racist they were.
Wild behavior.
And I saw a lot of, I mean, this even goes beyond the bad DEI we talk about sometimes. I don't even know what it's supposed to be, except for this pitfall, catharsis. So white people think, if I have privilege, they have sometimes this narrative that there's kind of a sin to being white, and then they need some kind of self-flagellation or punishment for the sin of being white, and then use these kinds of things where it's like, I've spent a lot of time feeling really bad about myself or really bad about racism, and then that's kind of the checkbox.
Like, I've done the work because I've spent time feeling bad about this.
Exactly. And we see this take many, many forms, even many that are less extreme than that one I mentioned. And I mean, you run into people who say things like, oh, well, I went to this workshop and it made me feel so bad about racism, so I've really done the work. It's is that doing the work?
Is that the marker for doing the work, is feeling bad about yourself or feeling bad about the history?
Like, how does that make the black folks' lives better?
Right.
I mean, unless the black folks are doing
change anything. Right, exactly.
Yeah. And so we see this in many forms, as I've said, but like not using whatever the educational media is as a catharsis that lets you off the hook. Like, what progress, are you actually making going through these things? Make sure you're making real progress, not just kind of feeling better about yourself.
Feeling better, not just a release, a screaming in the woods, right? Which, we need a little catharsis every so often. And catharsis does not make change.
And part of why I think this happens is guilt. So people sometimes talk about white guilt, but this can be any kind of guilt. Guilt is a really important emotion because it can motivate you to make change. Right. Like my PhD advisor's whole long career looks at how when folks have good personal values that oppose bias, but then they see ways that they could have behaved with bias, they feel guilty. It's a cognitive dissonance thing. The difference between how they wish they'd behaved and how they actually behaved creates guilt, and then that guilt motivates them to work on creating change. But that guilt emotion, you can relieve it if you've been punished, so to speak.
Right.
There's this kind of that idea of this catharsis. Yeah. So don't use the guilt to then get punished and relieve the guilt. Use the guilt to make progress. That's how we stop having the guilt, is by knowing we're actually doing beneficial, positive things.
Absolutely.
And then our final pitfall has to do with content that is more positive. Biopics about inspirational figures, people who have overcome hardships, and only kind of those kinds of positive things. And this is something that we've actually seen in some of my and my colleagues' research on the bias habit breaking training. An older version of the training had one part that people could construe as like, hey, look out for inspirational figures. And some of the people were looking at, say, Barack Obama. I mean, like, well, if a black man can be president, racism's over, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so they would see if, one inspirational figure overcomes the hardships that people face, they're like, oh, it must not be that hard. Any black person could be president or whatever. And so focusing too narrowly on inspirational figures, again, demotivates you to work on things because you think racism isn't as big of a problem or anti-gay prejudice or sexism or whatever the things.
It gives you false security in the sense that we've made more progress or we're beyond something than we actually are, right? Rather than saying like, here's an example. We have to have the hope. We have to have some of that, right? Of saying like, okay, so it is possible. And how many examples do we have of a person of color becoming the president? One. One. So if we say that, like, yeah, this is great. It is a sign of some progress. And we need more of this, right? Rather than saying like, hey, it's happened once, therefore we're beyond race, which how many times have I heard that? Like,
so many times.
So many times, especially in the Obama era, that like, oh, we're in a post-racial society, and that's just not. And I think since then in particular, we've definitely seen that we are not a post-racial society, right?
Yeah. And racism, bias, oppression, all those things, they're not dichotomous. It's not, they're on and then they're off. It never will be. It's always a continuous variable. So those are the four. And now we're going to take a little break and then we'll be back.
Welcome back from break. Before we go to story time, actually, I just had a couple other thoughts about the inspirational part too. Is we not only does it demotivate us from moving forward, but it also diminishes the work of X person that we're looking at. That's that idea of like inspiration porn, right? Where it dehumanizes, it can reinforce stereotypes, it can reinforce perceptions that are just not necessarily fully accurate, right? And so I don't know, I just think that it's really it's important for us to hold contextual understanding of these inspirational folks. Is Obama and Michelle, Barack and Michelle inspirational? Yeah, they are incredibly inspirational for so many reasons. Is Martin Luther King Jr. inspirational? Absolutely. Malcolm X, like all of these people, absolutely. And it reduces them to one part, the quote unquote best part that makes us feel good, and it dismisses what it took for them to get there. Like I think about MLK. He was not universally loved when he was alive, right? Like the man was assassinated, right? Like the idea that like this is our inspiration and we love him, yes, and you're missing a whole part of the story. And I think again, like thinking about things in that way, that kind of inspirational, only looking at inspirational figures as saying as an indicator that we've made it or anything that kind of again demotivates us, we have to contextualize it. And if we contextualize it, we may have more of that motivation of like, look at all, amazing, incredible people. Look what they've done. And look what it took for them to do the thing.
And how much more could they have done if they didn't have some of the obstacles?
How much more could they have done if we were in a different place socially and we were in a different place culturally, or we were, they have more people like me to come alongside them, and how many more people like this can we have in the future if I contribute to change personally and culturally, right?
And some of what you're saying reminded me of something you mentioned in, I think it was last season, so a while back, I believe the word's a dialectic, like holding kind of two opposing or potentially opposing thoughts, the inspirational figure and the difficulties they face. Both are important to recognize.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to diminish the work that they've done or even say that it's not inspiring. It absolutely is inspiring. And we have to hold all those truths to be self-evident.
And in bringing it kind of full circle to talking about specifically media you consume, it's also, it can be okay if the one piece of media focuses on one side or the other. What we want is across your media diet and also across the educational media diet, what we're kind of focusing on now. And then also that joyful entertainment media as well. We want all the flavors.
All the flavors.
Too narrow a focus on any one thing is going to leave out other important stuff.
Only bitter, only sweet misses so many parts of.
You also need salty and sour.
All of the things in the middle. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. Well, as we go into the story time, and as we know, we talk about a kind of a negative story and a positive story, and you have kind of both of our stories today.
Yeah. Yep. The negative story. So I have to be careful to protect the anonymity of the person here. So every season we usually have 4 guests. This season we were going to have 5 because, you know, after the podcast got ranked in the top 5% worldwide, woot woot, we actually got a lot more interest from people. And so I was like, oh, great, extra guests. That would be wonderful. Yeah. But one guest that we were going to have, and this is someone that I'd talked to in previous seasons about maybe being a guest, and we were finally going to make it happen. So this is a person who's kind of a higher up at a large university. She kind of talked with her colleagues in administration about it, just to, you know, make sure that it would all be okay. And because of the kind of current cultural climate around anything related to diversity or everything, they were scared of kind of losing federal funding just if she came on the podcast to talk about her area of expertise, which is very relevant to diversity things. And she essentially got censored. Yeah. They told her she really could not do it.
Yeah. For fear of loss of funding,
for fear
association,
of backlash, like all of that. Which on the one hand, maybe, you know, that shows how powerful they think our podcast is. I doubt it really would have done that much. But also she specifically said like she was angry and felt silenced by the administration and her work, wasn't able to be on the podcast.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, sad for us and for her. And it's just it's an example of, you know, where we are in kind of the backlash to conversations around diversity, which there's always been. And we've talked several times, I think, this season about how things are just more at the surface, where I think that there's always been a reaction before. Things are just really much more volatile and sensitive around these topics. Getting funding around anything diversity related is really hard right now. And so
or just completely impossible.
Right. And so the idea, and we're seeing more and more companies reduce and take out diversity, DEI, accessibility. And so again, it's just another example, and seeing somebody kind of being silenced and censored for their participation in wanting to promote anything that's related to diversity.
So maybe in some future year, we will be able to get that guest if climate changes or what have you. But yeah, so that's the more negative story. More positive story. There's another podcast that I listen to. It's called Stop Podcasting Yourself. It's one of the most popular
fun title.
popular podcasts out there. It has 2 co-hosts like our podcast. And they're 2 straight white guys, and they're comedians. And every episode, so they have a format where every single episode they have a guest. I started listening to them kind of towards the end of the pandemic, when a lot of us kind of were consuming a lot of extra media because we needed stuff to fill our time. And so I was going through their back catalog. They have hundreds of episodes. And, you know, in one day I'd listen to 4 or 5 or 6 episodes. And I was really kind of noting the diversity in their guests. And so they've never, that I'm aware of, talked about how they pick guests exactly. But we know that kind of comedy, stand-up comedy, is a very kind of straight white man's game. Women in comedy talk about this all the time. Many women say, you know, there will be a comedy club that's doing a lineup of 10 comics, and once they have one woman, they're like, check. And then they don't, like, they've some of the women comics will say things like, yeah, they said we already have a woman, so she couldn't be on the show. And similar with race, sexual orientation, disability. But on Stop Podcasting Yourself, you know, you can't go 3 episodes without one of the guests being a woman. Very often folks with disabilities who you can't necessarily hear on the podcast, but then they'll talk about some of their experiences, LGBT folks, people of color from all different kinds of races. And to me, again, I don't know how they pick their guests exactly, but there's no way that that's not some kind of intention, some kind of effort they're putting in behind the scenes to make sure that they're having some diversity on their podcast.
Given the prevalence of a certain demographic in comedy to have most of their guests or so many of their guests represent different groups. There has to, whether they explicitly say it or not, there has to be some intention behind it, which is really cool. And you know, we've talked before at some point, probably around like a Wakanda and Black Panther and stuff. I talked about like it's beautiful to see something have so much diversity without the diversity being the thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it is, right? Like they're being really intentional about it, but not making it about, hey, look at how great we are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because we're being really inclusive and we're really trying to broaden, you know, who we're bringing in.
Yeah. And it's a comedy podcast. I mean, their goal is to be funny. They tell funny stories, have funny people on, and, you know, it proves, anyone can be funny, of course. So I really like that. And I, you know, we often talk, when we talk about broadening your input, which also today's skill is part of the broadening your input. But when we talk about broadening your input through the media, I would also recommend that, a little extra joyful recommendation this episode, as kind of two white straight guys who I think do inclusion very well. And that's a good way to help work against biases we might have towards straight white guys or more powerful group members. Like, they're really good examples of guys who I think do it well.
I love that.
So
I love
that's
that.
my positive story.
That's great. I love it. So one of the things that you mentioned, and we kind of alluded to around like, oh, we have a woman, right? Check. So you can't come, right? Or we already have that person. So, and a few times whether it's in this episode and in past episodes, talked about like kind of this checklist. So tell me what's so bad about, or why do you hate checklist approaches so much?
That's our question for today.
That's our question.
Why hate checklist approaches? So very often, we talk often about kind of bad DEI approaches. Sometimes very often that looks like a checklist. Yeah. So, you know, mostly when I do my speaking engagements and give the training, it's because someone's read about our research and they've come to our website and found us. But every once in a while, there are kind of calls for people to apply for things. And very often those things have a checklist. Like, oh, you're going to talk about this term. You're going to talk about that term. Sometimes it might even be you're going to talk about the history of slavery or something, which in other contexts, like we were talking about earlier today, sometimes actually has more of a demotivational effect. The research shows that those checklist approaches tend to not work very well because they tend to have the effect of people thinking they've finished. Yeah. They aren't this kind of ongoing.
Done the thing.
They've done the thing. They've checked the box. They're not doing the kind of ongoing motivation that we want to keep up. It's always going to be ongoing work. The work can get easier as you are more and more practiced at it, but we want people to maintain motivation. And so to a certain extent, you can use checklist approaches. I think the right way to use them is to see where you maybe have gone wrong. So if you look back at the speakers you've had, the guests you've had on your podcast, like in the Stop Podcasting Yourself, and say, oh, wow, we've never had an Asian woman. Maybe that's something we want to like work on. Right. That can be okay. If you're using it to kind of see where you're missing something and then try to improve it. The problem is when you take it from that being a to-do checklist into what Amber sometimes calls a ta-da checklist, the thing you've accomplished. Don't use the checklist to say, oh, we've done that now and we're done.
Yeah. It's an opportunity for self-reflection, right? Of saying like, hey, we haven't done this yet, or here's an opportunity for us to broaden, right? Here's an opportunity for us to expand our inclusion, expand what we're doing, rather than saying like, hey, I had this person around, or I went to this place once. I had a conversation with a Black person once, right? Check, I've done the thing, right?
Oh, I've had my one Black friend, now I'm good.
I have my one Black friend, now I'm good. Or earlier, right, when we were talking about like I felt really bad, so I've done my work, right? We can't have it as a checklist of to-dos, but a checklist of to-dos. Like, how can I continue to expand what I'm doing and where I am and who I'm engaging with, or what I'm including and disincluding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is really related to our skill for today,
It
right?
is.
So talk a little bit more about the third prong of our skill today.
All right. So our skill today is more of that broadening your input, which we talk about a little bit every episode with our recommendations. So broadening your the three prongs. The first is making genuine connections,
Right.
which was last month's skill with Cynthia Moose Knuckle as the guest. So actually connecting with other people, making friendships, and so on. Second way to broaden your input is the media,
Right.
which we talked about already today. And we talk about every episode with our joyful recommendations, consuming media. And then the third way is by increasing representation in your social, physical, and digital environments. I'm going to take each in turn just to kind of give you the brief talk about it, and then we can expand a little. So physical environments, this is things like art, pictures of people in your lobby of your building, things like that are in your physical environment. Digital environments, this can be pictures on your website or social media platforms or your screensavers. The last time I talked about this, I talked about my colleague who has a screensaver of women of color scientists. All of these things can be input that comes back into your brain, pushes back against the biases. And then social environments, this can be things like speakers you invite. So we've already kind of been talking about like Stop Podcasting Yourself does. They do a great job, I think, of increasing representation in the speakers or the guests they have come in. But this could also be, people who come to your book club and speak or whatever that looks like for you. It can also be, I talked about this last time we covered this topic, syllabi. Like what readings are, that could be an aspect of a social environment, what authors are there.
Yeah. When it reminds me of a couple of things. When I was teaching, one of the things that I would do is we talked about decolonizing a few seasons ago, but we have lots of theoretical orientations, right? Like cognitive behavioral therapy, let's say, right? Or CBT. One way of broadening kind of the input on that is saying like, can we look at CBT not just from one singular perspective, but like, let's see how folks in Asia are talking about this. Let's look at this from an international perspective so we can broaden our view of even a theoretical orientation. So we have a much more, again, contextualized, more rich view of how this is. And I have two other things that came up in my brain too, as I was, I've been doing a lot of social media. I've been talking a lot about social media lately, but I've been on social media a lot. But I watched this clinic. It was an OBGYN clinic, and they were really intentional about going around and changing the pictures that they had in their lobby. One, they noticed that all of the pictures were of white women who were also very happy about having a baby, right? Yeah. And realizing like that's just not everybody's experience that's coming into an OBGYN, right? A pregnant person isn't necessarily a woman, and not everybody that's pregnant or is coming in is happy about it, right? And so shifting and having a diverse range of like what their pictures are representing and who they're representing, and the experience that it's representing, I thought was really, really powerful, and shifting how they were portraying, what they were portraying in their lobby. The other example I was thinking about is my church also does a really good job of like having multiple different types of pictures of like Jesus, because we typically have white Jesus, right? And so there's all of these different cultural representations of what Jesus looks like, and different skin tones and different parts of character and stories. And so it's been really cool to see like, oh, it's not just white Jesus. It's not just white Jesus, right? And seeing all these different inputs and visual representations too.
Looks like our producer, Eric Roman Binding, has a question.
Would you mind elaborating on the sort of demographics of your church? Like, do you go to a quote unquote black church?
I do not go to a black church. I go to a church that's still probably predominantly white, but my pastor is a Korean woman who really works hard talks a lot about immigration and diversity and justice and inclusion.
That's super cool.
It's very cool. And really, honestly, is one of the places that has got me back into attending church more regularly, because it's a place where I actually see a pastor and a congregation that is walking out what justice means and what I believe Jesus stands for, which is fighting inclusive of all people, and fighting for the poor, fighting for the immigrant, and so, I've been really, really thankful. And they work really hard. She works really, really hard to create inclusive spaces for everybody at that church. And it's a place that, like, again, I feel comfortable bringing just about anybody there, which has not always been the case. So anyway, they do a really good job of broadening even the kinds of pictures and depictions.
I mean, that's exactly the skill, what we're recommending. Putting up, so that would be physical environment, it sounds like.
Physical environment.
These
and
depictions of Jesus.
Who they bring in, right? She really is intentional about, we bring in native speakers. We have people from all over the world and different ethnic backgrounds and different communities come in and speak to the congregation as well.
So increasing representation both through physical, and then the speakers would be social
as well.
And just one last thing on this version of broadening your input. If these are public-facing images, like in the case of Amber's church, I usually talk about broadening your input with a kind of self-focus of like, what are you putting in your brain that helps push against biases? But also, people like seeing themselves represented.
Right.
And that's a sign to inclusion, a sign to belonging. And so when I see, someone with, using same-sex couples in their advertising, I'm like, oh, they care about people like me. And so same with the different racial depictions of Jesus. It helps people say, hey, I belong here. The people who put up these pictures even care about the perspectives of folks like me. So in addition to being something that can work against your bias in your mind,
it also helps create inclusion too.
Yes, helps create inclusion and belonging
for
members of those groups who often don't see themselves represented or not as often.
Could I add a weird thing?
Yes, please.
So like sometimes there's commercials for like STD medications and stuff. And it'll be like the HIV medication. And then it'll be like, there are gay people in this ad, but there are also what appear to be heteronormative people in this ad. And I appreciate that, because HIV doesn't just affect gay people.
That's a really good example. I love that.
Yeah, in terms of, I had a note to bring something else up, but then I was like, we moved past it. But since you brought that up, an audience member sent me an example. So these were pictures on diapers. And one, it was a white family with a white baby. So father and mother holding their baby for the white diapers, I guess. Maybe their skin tone based. And then there was the picture of the black baby and his mother for the diapers, no father. And they were like like they sent me this picture and it was right next to each other. So and at first it took me a second, like, wait, what's going on here? It's like, so the stereotype of the absent black father. And honestly, I'm guessing it probably wasn't intentional. It was probably they were having trouble finding a black male actor on the day.
Or maybe they were intentionally trying to portray a single mother and just were not necessarily thinking about the other message that they were conveying, right?
So if you're doing something different based on race, maybe be careful about that. Like maybe if it was they couldn't find a black male actor, maybe don't have the white male actor. Right. I mean, which is a different thing than it's,
or have a white male actor be the father.
Or that,
there are lots of other ways to do it, right?
And it's also drives
or
home.
Or a mother, have a second mother, right?
drives home the message that we talk about a lot. There's no one wrong way to do things. We got to think through them.
Absolutely.
So we'll go on our second break and then we'll be back with Amber's joyful recommendation. Woo. Welcome back, everyone. So Amber, what's your joyful recommendation this episode?
So last summer, this Netflix movie came out, and I was a little hesitant to watch it. Not really hesitant, but it's just like, oh, I don't know if it's really my thing, but I kept hearing about it. My kids kept talking about it. So I was like, okay, I'll watch it. And it's called KPop Demon Hunters. And oh my gosh, it is epic. It is fierce. It is this story. It's emotional. It's visually appealing and just beautiful. So the animation is really fun and interesting. And so it's this story of this K-pop group who uses their power of voice essentially to hunt and kill demons that are trying to enter into the world, and they're kind of like the protectors. And like nobody knows that that's what they're doing. They're just like these K-pop stars and they're a K-pop girl group, but they're like trying to like protect the world, like create a net that keeps the demons away. But there's so many layers to it. Then a boy band pops up. The music is amazing, which was another thing as far as broadening your input. I went to a K-pop sing-along night or karaoke night, and I really had very little exposure to K-pop, and I was like, oh my gosh, K-pop's amazing. It's so much fun. There's good music. And then I saw this movie, and the music in that movie is incredible. They are bops. They are bops. You definitely need to watch it. The music's great. The messages are really great. It's about identity. It's about understanding oneself, accepting oneself, protecting each other. It's got lots of different types of representation and identity. And so it's really a fun movie, and I was not expecting it. And so I don't know what I was expecting exactly, but it was so much more. And so I'm a big fan, and I definitely think people should watch it and enjoy the music and enjoy the message of, again, just like self-acceptance for things that you can't control and things that you can control. There's redemptive arcs. There's a lot of really, really, really cool aspects of the movie. So awesome. K-pop Demon Hunters on Netflix.
I remember when it was super popular last year. Like I feel like I saw ads or memes about it everywhere, but I never actually checked it out. So maybe I'll have to give it a watch.
Yeah, all my patients will come in and I'm like, oh, so like, what do you like to do for fun? Well, I listen to K-pop and I got to listen to K-pop Demon Hunters, and this is my favorite song. What's your favorite song? I'm like, oh, I haven't seen it yet. So I'm like, okay, I got to watch it just because all my kids are talking about it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I love this movie. Yay. It's so good. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm Dr. William Cox.
And I'm Dr. Amber Nelson.
My book, Overcoming Bias Habits, is out now. Check it out to learn evidence-based skills to help you effectively reduce bias and stand up for diversity. Diverse Joy is produced by Eric Roman Binding with music by Jay Arner. Follow us at Diverse Joy on most social media platforms for extra content. If you enjoy the show, help us reach more people by leaving 5-star reviews or by recommending it personally. Word of mouth accounts for 70% of how people find new podcasts. New episodes released the first Wednesday of every month. Watch us on YouTube, listen in any podcasting app, or check us out at diversejoy.com, where you can also find additional diversity education resources, buy some incredible merchandise, or donate to support the show. Diverse Joy is the official podcast of Inequity Agents of Change, a nonprofit devoted to evidence-based approaches to reduce bias, create inclusion, and promote equity. All that good Jedi work. Learn more at biashabit.com. Thank you for joining us. Now, go find your joy.
Bye.
Bye. Are we doing the question later?
Oh, I skipped it. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I jumped right over it.
Oh, sorry.